Right, thank you guys. So we will move on to our final technical presentation before we get some industry updates. We've got John Horsley, he's our BPCA technical officer. John's been with us since August, I think it is. Time flies when you're having fun, I think, doesn't it, John? Oh, I can. There we go. I can hear you now. It's those headphones, your little mute button at the back. Good stuff. Well, listen, John, I'll leave you to it, and yeah, enjoy.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning. My name's John Horsley. I work in the technical department here at the BPCA. And yeah, today I'm going to talk about the principles of bedbug control. When it lets me click, here we go. So we're going to look at biology and behavior. We're going to look a little bit about the signs of infestation. We're going to talk about prevention and can you prevent them? A little bit about resistance and control as well. Okay, so bed bugs, they were first mentioned in Europe in around the 11th century. They didn't make it across to the UK until around 1583. And then for the next 100 years from there, they remained fairly quiet. There wasn't many issues with them. With the advances of heated homes and central heating, it became more of a problem. They then died off as recent as maybe 20 years ago. The numbers reduced dramatically. Then we started having some problems with resistance, and they've come back with foreign travel as well. That has obviously spread them further. They go through an incomplete metamorphosis. So they start off as an egg, they develop into a nymph stage, and then that nymph stage gradually gets bigger until it reaches adulthood. The eggs need to be about 10 to 13 degrees before the hatch, and full development can take between a few weeks and a few months. It all depends on external factors. Say if you had eggs that were put into a piece of furniture, that furniture was then moved into storage. They may stay dormant there for a while before they then hatch when the furniture is moved again. They will molt between each stage. So as the eggs hatch out into the first stage, this will feed off the excretion from the adults, and then subsequent stages will then feed off a blood meal, and they need that blood meal to then molt into the next stage. You will find molted casts. I think there's a video in a couple of slides, and on the video you'll see bed bugs moving around, and there's some molted casts within it. And when they feed, they'll elongate. So a bit like the old accordions, them little panels will stretch out, and as they feed, they'll elongate. So they can look sort of a little bit longer than you'd expect, or a little bit sort of thicker in width. So the breeding, why is it important and how does it happen? Bed bugs go through a process called traumatic insemination, also known as hypodermic insemination. The males will climb onto the females, and these are some really good pictures that we was able to find of this. Climb on the females, and they have this dagger-like genitalia that they pierce into the abdomen of the female. They'll release the sperm into the body. That will then go through the body fluids until it arrives in the ovaries, and that's where the eggs will then be fertilized. The females will go on to produce around 5 eggs a day, and over a lifetime can be as much as 200. A female that mates more often will result in a lot of scarring, and that scarring results in lower egg production. So what you find with female bedbugs, once they've mated, they'll move away from the males, and this can spread the infestation as well. But they'll move away, lay them eggs until they need to be fertilized again, and then they'll go back to the males. And if they leave a period between mating, they actually produce more eggs that way. So they have to recover from it. Okay. Behavior then. So dispersal of infestation, you can have obviously local dispersal, which could be neighboring rooms, and this may be females moving off. It may be, if there's a hotel that's got different rooms and a room's not used or occupied, they may move to an alternative location to find that food source. And you can have non-local. So this could be in your luggage if you're moving from hotel to hotel, or things like secondhand furniture. I remember looking after a military site once, and the furniture was actually infested that came from a warehouse to populate a particular housing area. So it could be moved around in that way as well. They will aggregate together in clusters. They're not social insects as such, but they will aggregate together and they release an aggregation pheromone. And we'll talk a little bit more about aggregation pheromones when we talk about control. They tend to hide by day and feed by night. So their normal feeding pattern is between sort of 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. It's when we are at our deepest sleep. They'll come out, feed on you, and it takes around 5 to 10 minutes to take that full blood feed. So what you'll find is once they've sort of latched onto you, you'll then disperse them in your sleep. They'll move a little bit and then they'll feed again. So you'll get these sort of rows and clusters of bites. Everyone reacts differently to bites. Some people can show a reaction immediately. I think there was a presentation end of last year, and the lady had actually been bitten by a bed bug, and it had taken 2 weeks for that bite to develop. So there can be a delay in when you're bitten, and we'll talk about bite sites in a little bit. So how do they move around? Commonly, secondhand furniture and luggage. I think just about majority of maybe 90% of the bed bug treatments I've ever done were either from secondhand furniture being moved around different buildings, or it was people moving suitcases around when you're traveling, things like that. Researchers have, there's a piece done, I think it was America, where they did some research on nymphs and actually found that the nymphs of bed bugs could work their way through a zip on a suitcase and get in and out of that suitcase through that closed zip. So where are you going to find them? Sometimes when we talk about where you're going to find them, it's normally easier to talk about where you're not going to find them. Just be mindful when you're looking at a bedbug infestation, especially things like hotels, houses. They may be in one room, the bedroom, but don't forget that how people use that environment. So, they'll take the laundry down to the kitchen. So they might be transporting bed bugs within that clothing. They may then infest the kitchen. Things like sofas, places like that. It may be worth monitoring them while you're doing a treatment just to rule out anything being transported around the property if you're just treating maybe one particular area. So what are you going to look out for? Can you see bed bugs is probably one of the most common questions I get asked. And yes, they're about the size of an apple pip, sort of similar in color, can be this sort of dark brown to light brown in color. And when they feed, again, they will change color slightly as well. You'll see blood spots. So if you're staying in a hotel, for instance, you wake up in the morning, you may see blood spots on the bed sheets or around the pillows, and that's where they're feeding on you, and you've continued to bleed slightly after they've stopped feeding, and that blood is then got on the sheets. You'll find drop-ins, and if I just go back a slide, this black pitting is the drop-ins. You normally find them around sort of aggregation sites where they've been, but you will find this on skirting boards or travel routes, and you will see that drop-ins as well. The eggs you can find, they're quite small, this sort of white capsule with a like a manhole lid on the end, and just as they're ready to hatch, they pop that manhole lid off and then they crawl out through the opening. These are normally glued in place, and you'll find them again around where the aggregation areas are. So bites. I always get asked about bites, and I've been sent quite a few pictures in the time asking what could this bite be. It's very difficult because everyone reacts differently to determine what a bite would actually look like. But normally, there's some sort of swelling. Maybe it's a small red swelling of the skin, and you'll get them, as I said, in rows or clusters, and you can have quite a lot in a small area. But just be careful if you're getting asked to identify a problem with a picture of a bite or someone's bite. There's a lot of things that it could be other than bed bugs. So can you prevent bed bugs? It is very difficult to prevent bed bugs. It may not be that you've stayed in a hotel that's had bed bugs. It could be even in your house. It could be a neighboring property that's got them. And I was talking to someone recently where they had a periodic problem with bed bugs in a particular property. Couldn't work out why. They'd not traveled, not sort of changed any furniture or anything. And it turned out that the neighboring property had quite a serious infestation, and they were coming through that cavity wall and into their property, and that was what was causing the infestation. So yeah, preventing them is very difficult. You're never going to be able to foresee that as a problem. So what can we do if we can't prevent them? Well, early monitoring and early detection is going to be key. If you can find a problem early, you can sort of get on top of it before it becomes too big a problem. There's a number of different ways you can do this. You can set up monitoring stations, and there's a lot of different examples of these. There's pitfall traps, sticky traps. There's these cardboard ones that are in the picture, which is basically like a sheet of corrugated cardboard that you can see through. The bed bugs will aggregate in there. You hold them up to the light, and you can see what's in the little folds of the cardboard. If you're using aggregation pheromones, just be mindful that different products require different strategies for aggregation pheromones. I had some ones that you had to put in the fridge, and you had to leave them in the fridge until you were ready to use them, and then you take them out, put them in the pitfall trap, use them, and they'll last for about 2 weeks. So when you're getting them from your suppliers, just make sure you ask them sort of questions around aggregation pheromones. That's my phone, sorry. Physical looking for them. You can carry out physical inspections. Takes quite a labor-intensive process to actually go in and look for them. You're going to have to move all the furniture and things. And for 1 or 2 rooms, that would be fine. If you're doing like an 80-room hotel, that is going to take a long time. It's obviously not very practical. So then we can move on to things like canine searches, and they're really good for covering large rooms. If it takes you half an hour, 40 minutes to physically search a room, it'll take a dog just a few minutes to do that. And you can do a number of rooms in a day, and they are a good tool if you've got like large hotels. So this sort of early detection. Oh, I didn't mention training, sorry. Training relevant people. So if you're looking after a hotel chain or you've got like a housing unit, training the people that work there to actually find the problems early. That'll give you an early detection. You can get in there and do the treatments before they get out of hand as well. So training relevant people that are working in them sites to spot the signs early is a good way of doing it. Housekeeping, things like that are normally the ones that do really well because they see the infestations right at the start. So you get that call for bed bugs. Someone rings you up, they think they've got bed bugs. What can you do about it? Obviously, you need to get that positive identification. So actually going out and doing the survey is going to be important. But while you're on the phone with them, try and get as much information as possible. So find out, where the problem is, what is the problem. Try and get a bit of information from that, what size property it is. Because, if it's an 8-bedroom house, say, it may take you a while to go out and do that search. An inspection. So get a rough idea of what you're walking into so you can get a bit of a strategy going to start off with. Make the customer aware of any treatments that you're going to do if you intend on it, what the strategy is going to be. Do they need to do any prerequisites before you get there? Do they need to get access to a room? If you're working in places, commercial places, you may need to link up with electricians and other trades so you can get access to electrical voids. You might need to turn the electrics off if you're going to put like diatomaceous surf into the plug sockets. So linking up with them other contractors, trying to arrange that on your first call is going to be a key way to go. Don't forget to ask about, recent travel. Think where these are coming from. Have they been on holiday recently? Have they had new furniture delivered recently? Try and start building a picture of where these bed bugs and how they've got into this property. So the biggest cause of a treatment failure, I guess you could say, is the failure to carry out a good inspection and survey. If you can get in there and carry out a really detailed inspection, you know where all the problems are, exactly what you're going to treat, how much product you're going to need and things like that. That's going to be the key to a successful treatment. Think about where bed bugs will be. Like I said earlier, it may not just be a bedroom that's infested. They may be getting transported around the property or the building. So think about how them bed bugs are traveling. Think about rooms if you've been into, say, a hotel and they've had a bed bug infestation in a room and they've actually moved that tenant to another room. Ask them sort of questions. Have they been moved? Can I inspect that other room as well? Because it may be that the infestation is spreading without you knowing. And use your experience. You've worked and seen these jobs before. Use your experience with treating bed bugs to help you with these sort of inspections and surveys. So during the inspection, you're going to lift things. So you're going to have to move a lot of mattresses and bed frames. Obviously, get prior authorization from the customer. If you need to check like divan beds, you may need to take the bottoms off them to get into them divan beds and see where the issues are. You're going to have to move things like clutter and furniture and try and get into all the void spaces. Carpets may need to be pulled up, sort of taking curtains down to get them washed, things like that. So just keep an eye out for moving clutter and things around. Look under, look up, look behind. Make sure you do that sort of 360 pest control. Look everywhere. Don't rule anywhere out until you've actually checked it. And then you're going to repeat it. You'll do the same process for each room you're going to inspect, but make sure you do that detailed survey. And it can take a long time. 30 or 40 minutes is not uncommon to do a detailed survey of a large size room, as it were. And don't leave any stone unturned. So check everywhere. Picture frames, under skirting boards, lift the table up. It may be that they're underneath the table leg. This crack in the floor where the bed bugs are under this, they're aggregating under this table leg. Prime example of where they're going to get into. Keyboards, plug sockets, electrical equipment. It's a nice, warm, sheltered area. They will aggregate in there as well. Before you carry out your treatment, it's always good to get on top of these things before you get there. So speak to your customer, try and get them to do this sort of thing beforehand. But just be mindful if they're, moving clothes or doing laundry, that you advise them on washing it on a high temperature if they can, just to get rid of anything in there, and trying to store it away from where the infested site is. Whether it's you wash them and then put them in a polythene bag while the treatment's carried out, but try and give them a bit of that advice. Clutter and access are key. If you can remove some clutter or tidy some clutter up, this will give you better treatment area. Also makes it a lot easier inspection. So trying to get that clutter sorted before you get there is good. Just be mindful that any of these you do, you are running the risk of transporting bed bugs around that property. So if they're moving clutter from one room to another just to move it out of the way, it may be that they're going to spread the problem. So just think about that when you're there. And access, getting access to all the rooms. If you've dealing with a commercial site and they've got multiple occupied rooms, it may be that one's infested, but you need to check them around it as well, just to make sure that they're not being spread. And even if there's nothing there, it may be worth putting monitors in there so that when you're treating the infestation, you can monitor to make sure it's not spreading to neighboring properties. I remember doing or being part of a job years ago, and it was like a big sheltered housing, and the bed bug started in one room from secondhand furniture they were brought in, and then it was spread across the whole property eventually. And when we did the treatments, there were some rooms that we couldn't get access to for various reasons. They were locked off access, and that meant that you struggle to do a full treatment unless you can get to all the areas. So make sure you can get access to everywhere. Okay, so treatments. You got non-chemical and chemical treatments. The non-chemical heat treatments, and these can be full room heats or full building heat treatments, which can be quite tricky to do, and they're normally quite a specialist thing. Just make sure that probes are in cold areas, back of sofas and things like that, so that when you're carrying out these heat treatments, you're making sure that heat is getting to all the sort of non-easy to access places. Backs of cushions, backs of freezers, places like that. Heat treatment could also be a steamer. So you could use a steamer to run along furnishings, and that will kill all stages because that heat treatment will get into the eggs, nymphs, and adults. You can do freeze treatments. There's a few different options for freeze treatments, whether you're putting things in freezers as it were, or you can use like cryogenic treatments. There's quite a few different products now that are spray sort of form, and you can use them to freeze bed bugs as well. You can immobilize them. So a few years ago, a product came out that was for immobilizing bed bugs. There's a really good video of it online, and it just shows them spraying the mattress, and they all kind of get stuck there on the mattress, and they're immobilized in there and will die there as well. And you can use dust. So diatomaceous earth is a really good tool to use when you're doing bed bug treatments, especially around plug sockets, under carpets, them sort of void spaces. Dust work really well. And then you got your chemical controls, and I put in there microencapsulated. Just make sure that you are selecting the most appropriate formulation for the area you're treating. So if it is a porous surface, You need something that's going to sit on the top of that surface and not penetrate in. So yeah, when you're looking at chemical controls, just make sure you're selecting that appropriate one for your treatment. So pyrethroids and carbamates are probably the main ones that we're going to use. I won't talk too much about different chemicals in this, but that sort of information is quite easy to get from your suppliers if you want more information about chemicals, treatments anyway, products or treatments. Some will contain a IGR. You can have methoprene or pyriproxyfen. These IGRs, some have them mixed in already, and you can buy the sort of IGR on its own, and as long as it says so on the label, that can then be mixed with another insecticide and used in a treatment. So that's IGRs, or insect growth regulators. And then you've got metabolics, synergists. A synergist would be piperonal butoxide. Piperonal butoxide works by the insect has an enzyme that would break down the active ingredient, and a synergist stops the insect from producing that enzyme, so it just makes the insecticide slightly more effective because it can't be broken down. And we'll talk about resistance in a second. And don't forget, if you are doing treatments and you have to go back to do another treatment, you may have issues with things like resistance. So rotating active ingredients is key. So it may be one time you go use a pyrethroid, then when you go back, if you need to do a retreatment, you might use a carbamate or something like that. So just make sure you're being mindful about them products. So resistance, there's really 4 different types of resistance that we're going to see. You're going to get behavior resistance, and this is where the insect's behavior will change. Not something you see in bed bugs, which is why it's got that little cross on it. But you will see this in things like mosquitoes that will avoid going into properties now, and that behavior resistance has changed so that they last longer. You got penetration. So insects have this exoskeleton or the cuticle. That cuticle has developed to not be penetrated by insecticides. So that is a type of resistance that you may come across. D is for detoxification, and this is where I was talking about synergists. This is where the insect has an enzyme within its body. It uses that enzyme to attack the insecticide and stops it from working. If you use piperonal butoxide or a product with piperonal butoxide in it, that removes that problem and stops that detoxification. And then you've got a mutation of the action site. So let's take carbamates, for instance. They work on the nervous system, and you'll have 2 nervous cells. And in between them nerve cells, you have an enzyme which passes the transmission of nerves through. The insecticide will attach to that enzyme, and it will disrupt that travel of nerves through the nervous system. And if you get a mutation, that nervous system can't be attacked by the insecticide. So the actual insecticide that you're using won't attach to the enzyme in the nerves. So it won't work in that instance. So how does it come about? You'll go out and do your treatment, and you'll spray these insecticides with the products you're using. You may not get all of them, and there will be some that are mutated and survived. So these brown ones, I know these aren't bed bugs, but trying to get a little image of a bed bug, it was a little bit difficult. So you'll see that some of these mutated ones, the brown ones, have survived, and then there's one there that has not been treated with insecticide, so they have moved on. The next generation then will then be more resistant to the product in the future, and this is how we've built up these resistant problems, and something to be mindful of when you are doing your treatment. So sprayers and dusters, make sure they're well maintained. When I was thinking about this the other day, I always remember a little bulb duster I used to use for, little void areas. And it used to have a little metal cap on the inside that used to get blocked all the time. And I never forget trying to clean that out as a nightmare. So make sure sprayers and dusters are well maintained. Make sure you follow the product label. It is the law. Make sure you follow all the information on there, and only mix products when it says so on the product label if you're going to use insect growth regulators. Mix only what you need. So don't mix too much. Work out the area you're going to treat. Mix only what you need, and don't store insecticides. Things like powders will flocculate into the bottom of an insecticide. You'll get a buildup of residue, and that will block your sprayer. So just make sure that you use what's in that sprayer, so only mix up the right amount. Don't forget to take your torch. They are a very valuable tool in pest control. And a torch, I used to like having a head torch when I did bed bug inspection, because then it gives you two hands to sort of move furniture and things. But a torch is a good tool. And don't do what the guy is in the picture. Make sure you wear the correct RPE and PPE for the job you are doing. Managing customer expectations. So like I said a bit earlier about when you get that call, just make sure the customer's aware of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and all that information. If you can manage their expectations, and if you tell them that you can get rid of them, then hold up your side of the bargain, as it were. A lot of the phone calls that I get day to day about bed bug treatments is they've been told that they'll definitely get rid of them, and then it's 6 weeks on and they're still having problems. So just manage them expectations. If it's going to be difficult, be honest with them. It's the best way to be. Any questions?
I'm back. I'm here. I promise. It was we're just bringing my Q&A section up. Just one of the questions on there was regarding carbamates, and obviously mentioned there that we can use them. This is something that I remembered the other day. But yeah, obviously bendiacarb, isn't it? Is the main carbamate out there. But you said, John, you've got to read the label, make sure the insect pests are listed on there. And obviously we haven't got one of the most common bendiacarbs anymore, the liquid concentrates, and the dust formulation. I don't think, does it have bed bugs on the label? Not sure.
No,
I haven't read it for a while.
I did, because I remember doing this a few years ago, and one of the products we used to talk about when we talked about dust was an insecticide dust. I think the dust versions have pretty much all gone now anyway.
Yeah, they're few and far between. Hence, integrated pest management is key, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. So I have a comment here. Great presentation. Fabulous. In terms of control, which is the best way of I think it means preventing. So I'm going to assume what it says. So which is the best way of preventing bed bug treatment failure, i.e. sort of resistance to most chemicals used as an effective treatment approach as technicians? But I mean, you did cover the resistance side of things, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it's, like I say, it's difficult to, with any treatment we do, to foresee the issues you're going to face, especially with things like resistance. I think the main thing, and the thing that when I used to do treatments a lot, was making sure that initial survey and the initial treatment's done very well, and that will get on top of the problem a lot quicker. If you have got a little bit of resistance, hopefully it's not going to be too much, and use a different variety of tools that you've got. So we used to do a treatment called a SID treatment. So you'd go in and use steam first, steam all the beds, matches, things like that, aggregation sites that you've got depending on the area you're treating. Diatomaceous surf in all the voids, plug sockets, that first sort of 50 centimeters under the edges of the carpet. So making sure you're getting diatomaceous surf into them void spaces, and then you'd spray your insecticide last, sort of at the end of that first treatment. And if you use a combination, you're going to have more chance of success, as it were.
Absolutely. What's this wasn't a question that come in, it's just an interesting talking point, I think. But for example, with domestic property, if someone feels that they've got an infestation of bed bugs, but it's very minimal and it seems to be one side of the property, and they think to themselves, you know what, maybe this is coming from an attached property, maybe it's semi-detached or something like that. How can a private company maybe help a customer in dealing with that?
Yeah, I guess starting off, it's trying to speak with like the neighbours if you can. Go around, knock on the door, see if they've got any problems. Sometimes they're not going to be forthcoming with that information. There's quite a pride thing with bed bugs, that they've been associated with grime, as it were, in the past. But anyone can get bed bugs. It's just luck of the draw, I guess, if it's you or not, depending if it's in your hotel room. I suppose.
Tasty blood, isn't it?
Yeah, when you stay there, or however it's transported to your property. But from a neighbouring property, try and get some information by just speaking to them. That's a good place to start. If not, you may have to go down that local authority route, and trying to get someone like that to help you deal with that problem.
Yeah, no, good advice there. I think, if we can all use the local authority a bit more, it can help us out in many situations.
Yeah, sure.
Great, good stuff. Covered loads of bits there. No other questions. So it was obviously comprehensive. Thank you, John. Nice job. And I'll catch you later.
See you soon.
See you, John.